Hey everybody, Coach Lee here. Let's talk all things ultra endurance cycling. Just had an athlete rock out his last event of the year. He not only hit his PR, but he won the Psycho 24-hour overall with 461 miles. This is his first year as a full time, if you will, dedicated ultra athlete. And he won Calvin's Challenge with a course record overall. He won the Natchez Trace, producing one of the fastest times ever on that. And now he's won his third event of the year, Psycho 4824, specifically the 24. This video, we're going to break down kind of that race, looking at that data in particular. But I want to break down this athlete in terms of the whole year. Remember, this is his first year doing this. And so we really haven't tapped his full athletic potential, which could take 4, 5, even 6 years to do in the endurance world as an athlete wanting to rock out events across the world. So let's jump into the actual race itself before we do a big picture view of his event or of his year. The race itself is 24 hours. He was 23 hours and 34 minutes. Now, for him, that's actually, 26 minutes off the bike is actually a long time, but he has a new bike that he just got and he's still dialing in. So his new Ventum TT bike and his fit is not perfect. So that he took a little bit time every time that he would go around and actually stop. That he would, get off the bike and sit for a second. And that was because of the bike. But normally he's only typically about, 5, 6, 11 minutes off the bike for these events. Now, he had a great cadence of 67. That is the ultra cadence. When you're doing these ultra 24-hour, which are essentially just 24-hour time trials, you're going to have that low cadence. That's what we train for, but that's what he did, and he rocked it out. That is his race pace cadence. Then we got, 461 miles. That is his best ever. He did this course last year and got 399 miles. He got 439 in Calvin's, and now on this course he got 461. So this is his longest mileage ever. This is his in a 24-hour period, and with this particular athlete, we're going towards that magical 500. But it's going to take a little time, a little more training, dial in some tech. But yeah, he's definitely going towards that 500-mile mark. TSS 772, a massive ride. Average watts of 158 and an IF intensity factor of 0.57. What was fascinating, I'll talk about this again, about this particular race. He had an average watts of 158. His first half was about 162, and then his second half was like 156. So he was pretty much around that 160 for the entire event. He did a great job. But let's look at his entire year. So this goes back to November 2024, September 2025. This athlete came to me July 2024. He did a Mid-Atlantic event, the Mid-Atlantic 24-hour TT, in which an athlete that I was working with at the time won that event and was the only person on that day to get over 400 miles. So he reached out to me and said, hey, I really want to take this ultra world stuff seriously. What do I got to do? So I signed him as an athlete July 2024. And so he had a few things that he wanted to do to the end of 2024. So we really picked things back up. In terms of training, sort of November 1st, 2024 is when we launched this whole season. And so we can see in terms of what he's doing in terms of CTL and TSS. And so for the base building period, right, through that foundation period, I bring athletes down to the, sometimes it depends on the individual athlete, but in that foundation period, I bring them down to like a CTL of 60, of 70, of 80. That's a great place to train. One of the key focuses that I'm working on during that period is increasing their race pace, meaning we have to develop that aerobic engine. Fatigue is often the enemy of that very process. So if you have too much fatigue, if you're carrying a CTL of 100, 110, 120, chances are very good that you're too fatigued to actually grow that aerobic base. And so I bring him way down, and we do a very specific type of structured training, very specific work, lots of zone 2, lots of tempo zone 3 work to pull up that race pace, right? So if your race pace is 150 watts for 24 hours, you're going to get more miles if you go 160 or 170 or 180. These events are not about how much can I suffer. They're about increasing your race pace. And so that's what my foundation period all focuses on. And so then we start to get into March. He's able to get outdoors. He does a big block in China. And then we have Calvin's challenge. We can see the taper right here. We bring his CTL, but we get him to about maybe 110 CTL, bring down his taper. Then we have Calvin's challenge, which he gets first overall and a course record. Then he has some traveling and things to do. So we bring him down a little bit. We really want to absorb the stress of this event. And that's key. You're doing these big events. You can only do so many of them a year. The key is to absorb that stress of the event. And so I'm a really conservative coach. We're going to make sure that we absorb that stress. And so we absorb all that stress. Here he had a PR for his overall mileage in his 24-hour course record, first place. Bring him down. Then we start to bring him back up. We rest, right? And we see all that. Then we bring him back up, and he has a lot of travel. He's going to New York City. He's traveling all around the United States in this time. Then we bring him back up. He knows that he wants to do Natchez, and then he knows that he wants to do Psycho. So we bring him back up. We get him almost to like a 110 CTL. Then we taper him down. Boom. He goes to Natchez, and he gets first overall once again. And the gentleman who runs the race said that it was one of the fastest course times ever ridden for that Natchez race. So then we want to make sure that we don't overdo it. We don't want any injuries. We don't want any sickness. So we bring him back down. Gets down to a CTL of around 82, 83 before he hits Psycho, in which he hits his he gets his PR for mileage in a 24-hour event at 461 miles, and then he gets first overall in his 24. But when we look at this season, this is how I love to work athletes, right? We bring them up, we do this, we taper, have your event, bring you back down, absorb that stress, get you feeling good, start all over, come back up, come down. It's just an up and down process. But again, when I'm working with athletes, ultra athletes in their CTLs, I'm working with them at 80 and 90, and like this will shock because a lot of ultra athletes will show up with CTLs, these massive CTLs like 120, 140, well, chances are you able to increase your race pace with that 120, 140 CTL for an extended period of time? Now, I do bring them up. I keep them there, but I bring them back down pretty quickly in terms of that CTL. It's really a push-pull, a dig, relax structure that I work with my athletes, okay? Now, another thing that I work at and look at with athletes is efficiency factor. So efficiency factor is basically how many watts can you do per heartbeat, and we want more watts per heartbeat. So this yellow trending line, we can see over the last year, we can see that he is going up and he is getting more efficient efficient as an athlete. He's able to do more watts per heartbeat, which is what I work on as an ultra coach and what this athlete nailed, because it's absolutely beautiful to see over 365 days to see that efficiency factor trend line go dramatically up. Now, when we look at his overall CTL and we look at his FTP, right? So how do we know if we're increasing race pace? How do we know if an athlete should be doing, if I have an athlete that I'm working with and they have 20 to 30 hours a week, how do I know that they should be doing 20 and 30 hours a week? Well, over that 5-month foundation period, we test. We do VO2 testing. We do FTP testing, right? And if those metrics are going up, then we have you dialed in as an athlete. So if you're an ultra athlete and you're out there doing, 25, 30 hours every week, okay, that's a strategy. Are you able to recover from that amount of work? Pros do it, professional athletes do it, but they have a team. They're largely doing this as their full-time career, and most of their life after they get off of that bike is dedicated recovery. So you have to look at yourself as an athlete and say, is what I'm doing bringing up my race pace? Am I increasing my aerobic engine, which is what we want to do? Am I increasing that metric that measures your aerobic engine, which is FTP? These are all questions that you have to ask and dedicate. And so when we look at Kurt, it is working. And so we come in November, we give him a test, and then there's life factors. He goes down. But by the time he comes in May, and this was our last big FTP test of the year, he had a big block that he did in China, and he had a lot of traveling. So it was very hard to ever get in another FTP test. But we can see right here, coming in May, we have this nice block of work, and all this red represents work. And boom, he hits his FTP. So that's what we want to see over a 5-month period block, that when you come out of that foundation in May, we want your FTP, we want your aerobic engine to be as big as possible, which means that you're going to have your fastest race pace and also most likely your highest FTP coming out in May. Okay, that's very important. And that's what Kurt did. Just rocked it out. Brilliant athlete. Now let's jump into the race itself. So here we have the data. All this is the power. This is speed, and this is cadence. So looking at this is almost an absolute Mona Lisa of data. His power for the first half, we established his race pace through events, and we can really get close to it by just analyzing data, like what is your race pace? What can you hold for 24 hours? And so we can see by this power trend line that he has this dialed in. Look at how flat that is. That is ideal. There's only one other way that I like to see, is starting a little slower and see this trend line actually go up and ride the whole course according to negative splits. That's actually what he did in Calvin's challenge, where he started even slower and softer, easier, and ended in that last half, the second half, stronger, faster, negative splits. But I'm not going to split hairs on this, but this is just about as perfect data as you can get. In the ultra world, the biggest mistake, and this is what people are doing all the time, they go out too hard and they just collapse and they die 1,000 deaths, and then they have to spend more time off the bike because they've dug too deep going out off the start line. We saw this at Psycho. So I'm following people and I'm like, wow, that person's flying off. That person's flying off. That person's flying off. And then they're just dying one after another. Yeah, they have the fastest lap for the entire race, but how many laps were they able to do? How much time what they were able to spend on the bike versus off the bike. So Kurt, he goes out there. He's in the back of the pack. He doesn't get nervous. Everybody's off the front. He's just following his watts. And then all of a sudden, all those other cyclists, those athletes start to drop. And a lot of them, I could tell, I know the athletes, I'm just sitting there looking at their times, their lap times, and I'm saying, wow, that athlete just trying to win this whole entire race on the first lap or the second lap. And so, but Kurt, discipline is key. It's trusting watts and your established race pace. If you can do that, then you are going to get your PRs in this event. And that's what we were going for this event. We didn't necessarily know that we would get first overall, but we were definitely shooting for a PR, which he nailed. His speed, all very constant all the way through the night. Once again, this speed becomes problematic for this course because Psycho, it gets cold, it gets damp at night. You have gloves on, you have all this stuff on, so it's hard to maintain your day speed. And so he's actually keeps it really good, really tight throughout the same thing. And his cadence, he had an average cadence of 67 throughout this. We can actually see it go up, which is amazing. Typically what will happen for and I've looked at, world records. I've looked at the top people. I've looked at a lot of data in the ultra world. And typically what we will see just about with anybody is that your cadence will slightly drop. It's just muscle fatigue. But Kurt, as you can see, is that he is strong. He is fit. He kept that cadence going all the way through. So great job, Kurt. Now let's look at his heart rate. So his power trend line is pretty flat. This is another fantastic, this is what's going to happen in the ultra world, in that your heart is just going to settle in, and it's going to drop. And so you can keep the same wattage. You can start with a great heart rate of 110, 120, but by the end of that race, if you maintain your watts, it's still going to drop. It's just systemic fatigue. And that's what we see over time with Kurt. So, at 10 hours, he's fine, but by 15 hours, like you see this big dip. This is really what we see all the time. And now he's still fit. His heart will still respond. So in those last lap, he decides to, burn up some power and drop the hammer a little bit. You can see that his heart rate does go up. So his heart is not completely fried. It's just operating at a lower efficiency than what it was at the beginning of the race. But it's funny when I look at this data, it's around that 15-hour mark that we start to see, the heart rate, it might have been cruising for 120 for 15 hours. Then it goes down to 110. The heart rate just says, hey, here's my red card for the day. I'm done. You rock it out. I'll work with you, but I'm going to take a little siesta. So that was great. Cadence, once again, for the ultra cadence, this is what we're looking at. This is his FTP line right here. And we can see that all of his cadence is this low cadence, low force. Low cadence, low force. Where you're just at 65. You're just at 67, 66. Again, looking at all this data. World-class data. World records data. That 65 is a great magical cadence for these 24-hour TT events. Now, I have 10K TT athletes and 40K TT athletes. They're going to be spinning. They're going to be a lot faster. But for these ultra events, that low force, low cadence, slow grind really works well. And so it all worked well. Kurt had the season of dreams, if you will. Here he is in Psycho. That's the guy. That's his work that he did for the year. He largely did not get sick, and he entered 3 events, and he got 3 big wins and 3 big PRs. So what's next for Kurt and for the other ultra athletes that I work with? This was a banner year for me. I had overall winners, age group overall winners at like many events, like Hoodoo, 500, No Country for Old Men, Calvin's Challenge, Natchez Trace, Race Across the East. It was a banner year for all of my athletes, but particularly I really wanted to focus on Kurt because this essentially was his first year as an ultra athlete. So now what is Kurt going to do over the next, say 5 months? Well, we're going to bring down his volume, right? So given his individual life factors, that he's he's a husband, he's a father, he has numerous businesses, he's flying around, we're going to go with a low volume plan in which we build his FTP, which we pull that race pace up. So this year we really established him at 160 watts for his race pace. When we come out in May, we want him to be at 175 watts for his race pace. Now we can do this in a couple different ways. Like there are different training modalities, but I have Kurt really dialed in. We're going to reduce the volume. We're going to reduce the volumetric fatigue, if you will, but we're going to have some nice intensity. Lots of zone 2. Probably 75% of his work that he does over the next 5 months will be in zone 2. The rest will be dedicated to tempo, zone 1, but very little, 10% will be tempo, FTP. I like to throw in some VO2 in there as well for even though my ultra athletes, so that they, even though they're not using that in an event, their VO2, most likely not, depending on the event, but most events, they're not having to rely on their VO2. We're still going to work on his VO2 for these 24-hour time trials, but we're going to reduce the volume. Now, why do I stress that? Because I see other coaches, and they are just really in this volume mode where they just want to do all this massive base miles, 20, 30-hour weeks over the next 4 or 5 months. I say, okay, try that. Is your race pace increasing? Test. Kurt, I have dialed in. We bring him down. We test. We're going to watch his FTP go up. We're going to watch his race pace go up. All right. If you have any questions, I'm a full-time licensed nutritionist, coach, all that great stuff. My ultra athletes are rocking it out. If you are looking to take your game up to the next level, I'd love to work with you. Reach out to me in any form or fashion that you can. www.sandstead.com. Again, I am a full-time coach doing this. This is not my side hustle, so I will get back to you ASAP. Thanks, everybody.